Recently, the developers of a platform called EdCafe contacted me and asked if I wanted to test the app and make a review about it. And since I spent a stupid amount of time thinking about language learning tools, AI, pedagogy, organization systems, and teaching workflows, I decided to actually test it properly instead of doing a quick sponsor-style overview. So I approached this both as a teacher and as a learner and tried to answer a few simple questions. Who is this tool really for? What does it do well? And where does it still need work? Before starting, I should probably explain my general position on AI and educational technology. I'm not anti-AI at all. I use AI constantly in my work. Lesson prep, organization, brainstorming, content creation, all of that. But at the same time, I'm also very skeptical of a lot of AI marketing in education. So when I test a platform like this, I'm not asking, can AI replace teachers? I'm asking, does this make teaching easier, faster, more flexible, or less mentally exhausting? So what exactly is EdCafe? The easiest way to describe it is probably an AI-powered teaching workspace. The idea is not just to generate quizzes or chat with AI. The platform tries to centralize different parts of teaching in one place: activities, flashcards, reading exercises, assignment, grading, student organization, resource management, things like that. And I think that's where the platform makes the most sense, because the real problem for teachers today is not how do I generate one exercise. The real problem is teachers are drowning in tools. One app for flashcards, one for grading, one for AI, one for PDFs, one for assignments, one for organization. After a while, the mental load becomes absurd. So the main idea behind EdCafe seems to be reduce friction, centralize things, and simplify the workflow a little. So this is the main library screen. This is where you organize students, activities, folders, and teaching resources. And right away, you can tell this is trying to be more than just a quiz generator. It feels more like a teacher dashboard. You can separate activities by student, organize resources into folders, manage submissions, and keep everything in one place. And this part makes sense to me, because one of the biggest problems with modern teaching is fragmentation. Teachers constantly jump between different apps all day long. So even before talking about the AI itself, the organizational side already feels useful. Here we have the chatbot feature. Teachers can create custom educational chatbots with their own instructions and their own content. So instead of giving students unrestricted AI access, you can create a more controlled environment. The chatbot handled roleplay reasonably well. It adapted fairly correctly to an A2 level, and it corrected mistakes without interrupting the conversation every 2 seconds, which matters a lot for language learners, because if correction becomes too aggressive, students stop wanting to speak. There were also some funny AI moments. At one point, the chatbot fully accepted pâte à la sauce béchamel, as if this was a perfectly normal thing to order in the French restaurant. Technically possible? Sure. Culturally, French people would probably look at you with concern. And I think this is a good example of the current limits of educational AI. The grammar can be correct, the interaction can be smooth, but nuance and cultural instinct are still harder for AI. There's also a voice message system. So this is not a real-time voice conversation feature like ChatGPT voice. Students record voice messages, the platform transcribes them, and the chatbot can answer with voice. So the interaction is more asynchronous, can I say that? Sorry, excuse my English, not perfect. Still, for language learning, I can see the value because it adds speaking and listening practice instead of keeping everything text only. Here we have the quiz generator. You can generate quizzes from topics, texts, web pages, uploaded documents, things like that. You can also choose question types, output language, and additional instructions. These features work reasonably well. There were a few weird AI-generated questions sometimes, but nothing especially surprising for current AI tools. The main issue I noticed was language handling. When you teach foreign languages, you sometimes need to guide the AI quite carefully to control instruction language, target language, and explanation language. Otherwise, things can get mixed together very quickly. There were also a few unintentionally funny moments. For example, one suggested answer for politely refusing dessert was "Merci, mais je suis trop pleine." And technically, yes, it's understandable, but no French person would naturally say that in a restaurant. A native speaker would be much more likely to say "Je n'ai plus faim," "Non merci, ça ira," "Je suis calé." And this is exactly where teachers still matter. The sentence is grammatically understandable, but it still sounds slightly off culturally. Next, we have the YouTube quiz feature. The platform can take a YouTube video and generate comprehension activities from it automatically, which makes sense because Teachers already use video content constantly for listening practice, culture, pronunciation, comprehension. In practice, the feature works similarly to the normal quiz generator. The main difference is simply that the source material comes from a video instead of a document. So technologically, this isn't revolutionary, but from a practical perspective, I can absolutely see teachers saving time with this. Next, we have the flashcard system. This is a very obvious feature for language teachers because flashcards are everywhere in language learning. I tested the vocabulary card setup since that's the most relevant use case for me. The generation itself is clean, the cards generate quickly, and if the original material is good, the result is usually usable immediately. There's also an option to automatically add images that can help with memory and recall, but this is also where I started noticing one of the platform's biggest weaknesses, multilingual workflow. The system still relies a little too heavily on one global language setting, and that becomes complicated very quickly for bilingual flashcards. For example, French on one side, English on the other, different pronunciation systems, different explanation languages. That kind of setup is extremely common for language teachers, and the platform doesn't fully handle it naturally yet. Now, to be fair, there are workarounds. You can guide the generation with custom prompts and get fairly usable visual results. And I do think this is one of the better uses of AI in the platform. The app is not pretending AI magically makes people fluent. It mainly uses AI to speed up content generation and organization. That makes much more sense to me pedagogically. The pronunciation issue still remains though because the voiceover follows the global language setting. So you can end up with French words pronounced with English phonetics, especially short ones. For language learning, that's a real limitation, unfortunately. I also found editing a little clunky sometimes. In some cases, regenerating the deck was faster than editing it heavily. So useful feature, good for teachers, still rough around multilingual language learning workflows. This doesn't really feel like a dedicated learner flashcard app like Anki or Quizlet. It feels much more teacher-oriented. The strength here is I want to quickly generate vocabulary material connected to a lesson and assign it to students. And for that use case, the platform makes sense. Next, we have the reading activity feature. I like this feature. The idea is generate reading comprehension activities from text, articles, web pages, or uploaded material. And for language teachers, that's very practical. For this test, I used an excerpt from Le Petit Prince and asked the platform to create activities like for English-speaking learners of French. The generated content itself was solid. The questions made sense, the vocabulary extraction was useful, the structure was coherent, everything all right. The platform usually identified the important parts of the text correctly, but once again, the language handling became complicated. Even though I explicitly specified English-speaking learners of French, the platform tended to fully commit to one language at a time. Either the activity came out almost entirely in French or almost entirely in English. I mean, not almost 100%, but it struggled with more hybrid bilingual setups. And after seeing this across several features, I don't really think the problem comes from the AI itself anymore. It feels more like a product design limitation. The platform probably needs more precise language controls, target language, learner language, audio language, explanation language, and all separately controlled. Because right now, things can become confusing very quickly for beginner learners. But that being said, the pedagogical generation quality itself was very good. Next, we have the assignment grader feature. And this one is very clearly teacher-oriented. Teacher can create assignments, define grading instructions, add rubrics or support material, and let the AI generate feedback on student work. And I can absolutely see the usefulness here because correcting writing is one of the most time-consuming parts of teaching. So even if AI feedback still requires human supervision, I can easily imagine this reducing repetitive correction work considerably, especially for homework and writing activities. Also, you can see here, this is one thing I wanted to tell you, is that we have another menu that shows content and planning. So you can see here, I've been showing you the main activities that we can do in EdCafe. I don't want to spend too much on this because it's going to be too long of a video, but you can see you also have a whole section named content and planning with the possibility of creating slide decks, teaching resources, summary note, lesson plan, AI speech, and AI image. The slide deck section allows us to create some kind of PowerPoint presentations where you can add some content for your students. Obviously, this is more a teacher feature here. And coming back to the menu, teaching resources, here you can find online all the teaching resources related to one topic. So this can be also very interesting. It's just going to reference all the things that you can find on the internet. and you can pick the type, whether it's an article, a slide deck, a video, or a worksheet. Now, if you go to summary notes, as its name indicates, you can create a summary note for your students based on topic or source material. You also have a lesson plan. So this is when you have to plan a sequence of lessons for a student on, let's say, one skill that you want your students to acquire, including grammar, listening comprehension, reading comprehension, production as well. AI speech. So this is very interesting, and also this might be useful for students themselves. They could create some stuff using this. This is something I like to do a lot when I learn vocabulary. You can create written content into spoken audio for easier learning and accessibility. I like to do that with my vocabulary list, as I mentioned in my previous video about vocabulary learning. If you haven't seen it, I will link the video. So here, actually, it is very interesting to memorize while commuting, while doing something else, having a audio file that keeps repeating your vocabulary words, in the best case, put together into a text. So you have context. So I really like this feature here. You have different voices, English voices mainly, but also multilingual voices that allow you to have your TTS in the language you choose. And finally, AI image. So this I don't need to explain. You have different image generation options, so you can also generate some content for your students. As for the general observation, beyond the AI generation itself, there's also a real management aspect built into the platform. So you can organize folders, assign activities, generate QR codes, track revisions, monitor submissions, all of that. And some of the experience did remind me a bit of Quizlet, not because the tools are identical, but because of the workflow around assignments, revision tracking, and student access. And I think this is probably the platform's real strength. Not that every individual feature is revolutionary, but the fact that everything is integrated into one ecosystem. As for the weaknesses, at the same time, the platform still has clear weaknesses. The multilingual workflow definitely needs refinement. Language handling can become confusing very quickly in language learning contexts. The pronunciation system still struggles with bilingual flashcards, and some features also feel more polished than others. And visually, I also think the platform still feels fairly basic, especially the automatically generated flashcard images. A lot of them have that generic stock image database feeling. Now, to be fair, I understand why. The platform clearly prioritizes speed and efficiency, which is all right. But as someone who has also used this kind of tools as a learner, I do think aesthetics matter more than people sometimes realize. Visual atmosphere and graphic consistency genuinely affect long-term engagement. And I think some modern learning apps understand that very well. Hi, Duolingo. So overall, I think EdCafe is an interesting platform. I don't think it's trying to replace teachers. And I think that's part of why the app feels more grounded than a lot of AI education tools. The AI is mainly used to accelerate content creation, organization, correction, and workflow. And in that sense, the platform mostly succeeds. But at the same time, multilingual teaching workflows still need refinement, especially for language teachers. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend EdCafe as a perfect all-in-one language learning platform for students. But as a teacher,